The moon was a thin, bruised sliver, its pale gleam smothered by undulant banks of cloud that rolled out of the shivering sea like slow, soundless breakers. Beneath that bruised crescent, the haunted forest crouched, black and brittle, every spruce needle crusted in hoarfrost, every trunk sheathed in a thin glaze of ice that rang like tiny bells whenever the wind stirred. No other music could be heard so far north of the wall. Not the piping of owls, nor the cracking of distant limbs. Not even the frosted chatter of the little brooks that in fairer seasons wound through moss and stone. Tonight, those brooks lay locked beneath skins of silver. Tonight, the dark was deeper than ink, and the cold wore claws. Sarorana Frost breathed that cold and felt it carve little razors down the back of his throat. He was no green boy, 10 years a ranger, half of them patrolling the long leagues beyond. Yet he had never known a night like this. The cold was not merely cold. It was a silence that crawled beneath the fur of his cloak, a hush so perfect it seemed to devour the beat of his heart. Even the horses felt it. His Garin Greyfeather had begun to shake the moment the moon vanished behind cloud, and each tremor made the tack creak like a door on rusted hinges. Orain reached forward to soothe the gelding's neck, gloved fingers stroking thick winter coat, but the tremble only worsened. Whatever lay coiled in the dark, the animal knew it better than he. Ahead of him the column wound single file between frost-mantled pines. 8 riders of the watch, sworn brothers all, black cloaks turned ghost-white by rime. No one spoke. They had left Castle Black 4 days ago in answer to a flare, a fire arrow launched from an old half-buried watchtower that the first builders had raised in the dawn of days. The tower stood 14 leagues north-northwest of the wall, beside a nameless rill where the trees grew thin enough to let you smell the milkwater air off the sea. No sworn brother was posted there now. The watch had not manned those ruinous stones in 150 years. So when the green flare bloomed above it, painting the clouds the sickly hue of a grave candle, Jor Mormont sent riders. "Find who fired it," the old bear had growled. "And if it's a trick, flay the fool who thought to play it." Yet here they were, 4 days on, and the tower had offered nothing but empty. Snow-choked rot. A hearth lay cold, where some small fire had burned. Embers no older than a sennight, but there were no footprints in the bailey beyond. No spoor save the soft, slick notches of something enormous that had slithered through the yard and away into the tundra. Orain had crouched above one of those hollows, pressing a torch near to melt the crust. Beneath the top layer lay black ice, smooth as glass, and in its blackness, a ghostly reflection. His own eyes, wide and rimed, staring back through wavering candle flame. The shape of the track was nothing he had ever seen. Too broad for bear, too sinuous for wolf, too heavy for man. When the wind gusted, the track hummed, faint as a plucked string. They left at dusk, hearts beating a little too swiftly, and when the last ink of sunset fled the trees, the hush descended. A branch snapped far to the west. Sharp as a screamed word, every rider halted. Even the horses fell rigid, heads up, ears pricked, fogging the night with plumes of breath that shone like quicksilver. Orain's hand slid to the dragonglass dagger sheathed beside his sword. Samwell Tarley, that soft-bellied steward the Lord Commander doted on, swore obsidian was death to the others. Orain did not know whether he believed such tales, but the blade's edge looked hungry in the muted moonlight, and he was glad of it. Snap. Dot-daw. Closer this time, and followed by a low crunch, as if some heavy thing settled its weight upon a crust of snow. The horses began to dance, iron shoes squealing. "Hold them," Orain hissed, more to himself than the men behind. Gloved hands tightened on reins. The weight of silence swelled, pressing at his eardrums until they rang. Then the trees parted ahead. It came out of nothing, tall as a moose, gaunt as famine. Its fur a ragged shroud of dirty gray, clotted to ice along a dozen old rents and tears. A bear. Gods, a bear big as Hodor's nightmares, but wrong. Horribly wrong. Where the lantern light touched it, the fur did not gleam brown or white, but a queer pallid blue, as though the animal were carved from pearl held to the moon. Its eyes were twin chips of cloudy ice, and in that ice danced minute points of lambent winter fire. Someone whispered a prayer. Someone else loosed a whimper that might once have been a word. The bear opened its mouth. No sound issued forth. The jaws cracked wider, and a gust of cold spilled from between yellowed fangs, a cold that smelled of rusted iron left too long beneath the reins. Its breath had no steam. It lurched forward. Steel rasped from scabbards. The bear reared, and its forepaws struck the nearest pine with such force the trunk sheared in two, the upper half crashing through branches, snow falling in fat blue clumps where the moonlight touched it. Oraine's bow brother, Garth the Tall, spurred to intercept. His sword flickered up. The bear's paw came down, swatting steel and rider alike as though they were blown chaff. Garth cartwheeled from the saddle and vanished beneath a burst of white. The snow closed over him. His horse shrieked. Somewhere, unseen, back. That was Oraine, voice raw. But they were already bolting, reins jerking, hooves splitting crust. Behind he heard the bear grunt, the crunch of snow as it bounded. He risked a glance, pale blur weaving between trunks, too swift for something so monstrous. Frost flew from its paws like shattered glass. "Dragon glass," he cried. But with each breath the cold gnawed deeper, hollowing his lungs. The great cloaks of the watch billowed, black banners turned white at the tips, and the hush roared louder than any storm. Then the moon slipped free of cloud. Its feeble light fell upon a clearing fringed by ancient weirwoods, their faces blistered by centuries of wind. The clearing lay unmarked save for a single shape at its center, a monolith of ice, tall as 3 men, scoured smooth. Within its heart glimmered something milky and vast, like a spine twisting upward through frozen crystal, and crowning that spine, Oraine's pulse skittered, was a circlet no larger than a man's helm, wrought of the same glassy radiance as the column itself. Something else stood before the monolith, something slender and jointed, robed in frost smoke, crownless beneath the moon. It lifted a hand that had too many joints, and the bear halted mid-stride, ribs heaving soundlessly. The air froze harder still. Silence pressed like a thumb to his throat. Oraine could taste copper on his tongue, though he knew not why. A voice seeped into his skull. It did not pass by ears, but rather echoed from the marrow of his own bones. "Fly south, little firelings." It was neither man nor woman, but the grind of ice over stone. Yet beneath the chill he felt an ancient grief. Fathomless sorrow drunk slow over centuries of night. "Fly south and hide your candles. Dawn has fled you. The king wakes." Oraine's horse broke then, and he with it, galloping blind through trees that seemed to lean aside to spare him. Wind howled in his ears where seconds before there had been only hush, and somewhere behind he heard the bear give voice at last. A roar that split the brittle silence like swollen ice cracking upon a thaw. He did not slow until his Garin stumbled, throwing both of them into a drift so deep it swallowed all sound. Somewhere to the east torches flickered, brothers calling in panic, but for long moments Oraine lay listening to his heart slam against his ribs. When he found breath, it escaped him in a ragged oath. "The king wakes," he whispered, and still the bones of that voice shivered through his marrow like shards of winter glass. Far to the south, in the smoky warmth of Castle Black's library tower, Samwell Tarly frowned at a parchment older than the conquest. 2 hours past the midnight bell, he hunched alone beneath sputtering tallow, spectacles fogged, wool collar scratching his neck. He read the same line thrice, lips moving soundlessly, then brushed crumbs of candle wax from the script, and read a 4th time just to be sure. And in the 10th year of the white rain, the cold children bent the knee to no moon or shadow, but only to the Lord who whispered in the storm-green heart. The maester who penned those words had carefully scored through them after, as though afraid someone might read and remember. Yet the ink still bled faintly beneath the deliberate cross-hatching, and Sam's own meticulous copies, prepared with mixture of oaky gall and vinegar, preserved every letter. He straightened, rubbing eyes gone gritty. The white rain. He had seen the phrase but once before, in a fragment from the recesses of the Citadel's famed Glost. Sam shook off bleariness. "Focus. He ought wake John at once. The Lord Commander was fond of saying rumor was a sword, best drawn early if you meant to use it. Yet Sam hesitated. Best have more than rumor, he muttered, and bent again to his parchment. That was when Ghost, silent as falling ash, rose from the gloom near the stair. The Derrywolf's red eyes smoldered, his muzzle wrinkled in a snarl so tight the flesh trembled. Sam flinched, quill jerking. One crimson drop of ink splashed across the parchment like spilled blood. Ghost's hackles stood thundercloud high. "What is it, boy?" Sam whispered. The wolf did not answer, not with sound. Instead, Ghost's gaze fixed on the little window slit that opened onto the night, and the hairs at Sam's nape prickled as though a stranger breathed upon him. Outside, dark pressed the glass like a great black thumb. In the silence, the tower seemed to shudder, timbers creaking, walls settling under a weight too vast to name. Sam pushed back from the table, ink-stained fingers trembling. He scooped the parchment, rolled it clumsily, jammed it into his belt. Ghost pivoted toward the stair, ears flattened. Somewhere below, a horn began to blow. One blast, then another. Slow, sonorous. Sam's stomach dropped. Not wildlings, not rangers returning. 3 blasts was rangers. 2 was wildlings. 1, dear gods, 1 was 4. The horn cut short, strangled mid-note. Ghost was already plunging down the stair. Sam followed, his robes tangling about his legs. Candle flame whipped in his wake, sending fractured shadows dancing over curving stone. The tower door banged open below, letting in a gush of air so bitter it burned his lungs. John stood in the yard, sword naked in his hand, lamplight glimmering upon the Valyrian steel. Around him, brothers spilled from halls half-dressed, groping for spears, crossbows, anything. The night rippled with distant shouts from atop the wall, and from somewhere beyond the gate tower, a wolf raised a howl so long and aching it seemed to bleed. Sam scrabbled at Joan's sleeve. "It's the horn," he gasped. "1 blast, John, 1? I know." Joan's face was stone. Only his eyes moved, scanning the darkness beyond the ring wall. But nothing stirs. "Look." Sam looked. The courtyard lay hushed, torches guttering. No gate groaned, no dead hands clawed at ice. But the cold. Gods. The cold felt wrong, thicker than air, sharp enough to flavor every breath with blood. "Where's the horn?" John asked the men. No one answered. The hornblower, it seemed, had vanished like breath on a glass. Sam fumbled the parchment from his belt. "John, listen." His teeth chattered. "White rain, a lord who whispers in the storm-green heart. I think it means later." John turned away, sword lifting. "Sam, to the rookery. Wake every raven. If this is..." The words dissolved. From the wall's crest thundered a sound beyond sound, the crash of vast ice sundered by some monstrous hammer. A white geyser of powder plumed skyward, glimmering starbright before the wind shredded it across the moon. Then came screams, thin, ragged, swallowed quick by distance, and the clamor of the bells. 5, 10, 100 iron tongues kicking at once. John Stark's face lost its color. "The gatehouse," he breathed. Ghost bared fangs wet with froth. Sam ran Doughty, past the Bridge of Skulls. Half buried in snow, the village of Whitemarch dreamed fitful dreams of summer that would never come. Wooden huts lay lashed by gusts of razored frost. Cracked chimes of ice hung from eaves. Beneath one sagging lintel, an old woman stirred her cook-siu fire, though the flame yielded more smoke than heat, for the woodsman had returned with pine logs already soaked through with hoarfrost. The woman's name was Skakella, and some free folk said the snow had settled in her hair the day she was born and never melted. Her husband lay dead these 20 years. Her sons followed their Magnar toward the sound of thunder south of the Frostfangs, and her daughters found husbands nearer the Milkwater, but Skella had remained behind to tend the bones of her kin. She heard them now, those bones, rattling beneath the hearthstones. Not with wind. Wind cracked the timbers above. This was a deeper throbbing, like drums submerged in the marrow of the world. Scaella looked to her fire and saw that the flame burned green. Storm green. She murmured, and every wrinkle in her face felt carved anew. She rose without knowing why, pulled her hide cloak tight, and stepped into the night. The village slept. No watchfires shone, for wood was scarce. The only light came from Scaella's doorway, a feeble smear that scarcely reached the midden heap. Yet in that faint glow, she saw the snow swirl against some invisible shape. A vortex turning about a hollow core the height of a man. The cold there seemed to glow, and from its sheen she heard a whisper that was not made of words. Her heart fluttered like a sparrow pinned beneath ice. She knelt, though her knees splayed wide with old age. When she opened her mouth, she found her breath had turned to mist before it left her lips. "My king," she tried to say, but her tongue scraped against frozen teeth. The snow whirled faster, climbing the hollow shape, molding to lines that her mortal eyes could not fix. For a moment the night itself stood upright before her, taller than giants, finer than spider silk, and crowned with frost that threw moonlight like shattered crystal. Her tears froze before they fell. Then the shape folded into itself, becoming again only wind and void. Yet when the gust died, Scaella saw swirling in the snow a single falling leaf. Green as spring, though no such leaf had grown this far north in living memory. It landed at her feet, and when she dared touch it, she found it carved of ice so delicate it did not melt at her heat. In its veins glimmered little sparks of pale emerald. Scaella carried that leaf inside, laid it atop the bones of her dead beneath the hearthstone, and whispered a vow older than her people could remember. When Scaella slept that night, she dreamed of a throne of shivering crystal. And on that throne sat a king whose eyes were not the white blue of the others, but a deeper green, dark and drowned, like pine needles, seen through river water at winter's heart, far beyond both wall and weeping, hidden among peaks no map dared name, a glacier split, like the parted lips of a goddess carved from chill blue stone. In the womb of that riven ice lay a vault not touched by sun in 10,000 years. There, beneath stalactites, long as city spires, reposed a bier of black obsidian, ringed by runes that more resembled wounds than letters. Upon that bier slept a figure tall as the king's guard, yet lean as hunger, clad in accretions of frost glass that shimmered each time the vault exhaled its thin, sorrowful sighs. Around him clustered shapes like dancers frozen mid-revel. Others, a full 100, beautiful as the night sky, and just as pitiless. Swords of pale light rested across their knees, yet none stirred, for the vault itself enforced stillness, as though time congealed thicker here than anywhere above. Only the sleeper moved. Tiny twitches rode the muscles of his jaw. With each breath, the air above his lips filmed white, as if his lungs distilled soul from emptiness. Atop his brow glimmered a crown of ice darkly veined with living pine green. The same green that burned in Scaella's leaf, that shimmered in the column of rain frost had glimpsed. 1,000 hairline cracks spider-webbed that crown where warmth pressed from within. And along those cracks seeped the faintest nectar glow, neither fire nor ice, but some mingling of them both. On the bier's edge lay a scepter wrought from weirwood and frozen tears. Its grip bore the impression of fingers long absent. The vault's size quickened, a slow tidal breathing. Frost grains slid from the sleeper's cloak, pattering like rain upon stone. The vault itself seemed suddenly smaller, as though walls flexed inward at some vast command. The sleeper opened his eyes. They were the cold white of moonlit lakes, where ancient pines leaned over stillness. And at their centers, small pupils of heartwood green rotated like tiny vortices. The others did not speak, yet as one they rose, and something like music shivered the air. It sounded of wind through winter branches, and the merest breath of snow across crystal hills. In the resonance of that music, runes along the bier ignited, rising in a crown of low emerald flames. The king drew the first true breath of his new dawn. Somewhere far below, a horn meant for mortal hands shattered upon the floor of Castle Black's gate tower, and the wall answered with a groan that might, in gentler days, have been taken for sorrow. Morning never quite came. The sun roused itself, a bleached wafer low on the horizon, but its light felt strained, as though it traveled leagues thicker than air. At the watch's forge, Donal Noye stood at his anvil, shoulders set. But every time the hammer struck, white sparks instead of red flew from the iron, and the metal sang a brittle note he had never heard. Rangers came and went, seeking arrowheads and spear points, muttering of sounds in the dark, half-seen shapes that dissolved when lanterns turned. A raven perched upon the sill observed all with black-bead eyes. When Noye cursed the cold, it bit even through the forge's usual glow. The bird cocked its head and croaked a single word. "King." The smith paused. "What did you say?" "King," croaked the raven, fluffing soot-speckled feathers. It hopped aside, and Noye saw the ice seeping from the sill where its talons had rested. Ice in the forge. Impossible. Donal Noye was a man who believed what his hammer told him. He looked to the half-arched spearhead, saw how its edge had split of its own accord, and felt unease hollow his chest. Without wiping sweat, he strode out into the yard. There he found Jon Snow directing men. Boy, rather, though no longer quite a boy. Jon's sword sheathed now. He barked orders for extra fuel to the gatehouse braziers, double watches on every parapet. Ravens winged south to both White Harbor and Winterfell. Noye took one look at the smudge of fatigue under those gray eyes and shook his head. "Bleeding yourself thin won't thicken the walls, Lord Commander." Jon exhaled a plume of white. "When the wall groaned last night, I thought it might fall. But it didn't. No. Not yet." Ghost prowled beside him, hackles high still. Any other man might shrink from that pale specter, but Donal Noye scratched behind one red ear and Ghost tolerated it. The direwolf's fur felt warmer than any cloak. A horn sounded one blast. Jon said, low. "Dolorous Ed swears by every god he did not blow it, nor did his men." The horn was found cracked clean through, lying yards from its stand, no footprints near. A miracle of the wind, perhaps. Jon's smile was a wound, or a warning. "You think the dead walk. I think worse." Jon's gaze flicked eastward, beyond the towers, beyond the frozen river where light died premature. "Sam has found something. Words from before the long night. They speak of a king. King over the others?" Noye's laugh was a single bark. "They need no king. They are cold itself. Every storm has an eye," Jon said softly. "And even the cold must have a heart. If such a heart begins to beat again, the storm will only gather." He rubbed at the hilt of Longclaw, as though it irked him. "I sent a rain frost north-northwest. He and his men have not returned. Ghost scents blood on the wind, yet can find no trail." Noye looked again to the direwolf. Ghost's crimson gaze returned nothing. "The ravens carry your words?" the smith asked. "Some of them. Many refuse to fly. The sky is heavy," Noye grunted. "I'll keep the forge hot, best I can." He remembered the spearhead splitting at a single blow, felt a chill no flame quenched. But if the iron no longer sings true, then song alone will not save us. Jon's eyes, when they lifted, were no longer a boy's at all. "Then we pray Winterfell answers," he said, "and Old Town, and the Stormlands, and sons we have never seen. For if the songs fail, it will fall to stories. And if the stories fail, it will be faith alone that holds. Faith, and the few swords we have. And if faith fails, then we die," Jon said, as though that at least were certain. East of the gorge, a solitary crow fluttered through rising drafts, black feathers silver-rimmed by rime. Its flight was erratic, as if the bird warred with some private wound. Twice it lost height, dropping toward the trees, only to beat wings manic and climb again. Beneath it spread mile on mile of forest, scored by frozen rivers, that wove like pale scars between ribs of granite. The sun's light, wan as a promise long forgotten, skidded across that endless timber like spill of tarnished coin. No other birds winged those skies. No deer picked their way through stone groves. Even the ever-present caw of the northern ravens had fled, as if swallowed by a throat too outlandish for waking men to name. The crow's right wing bore a single pale feather, unnatural among the glossy black. Where its shadow crossed the snow, that single feather gleamed frost-white, as if catching light from nowhere. The crow cried once, a harsh, broken cough, and in its call echoed something older than speech. Far below, in the lee of a frost-drowned ridge, 3 wildlings trudged cloaked in wolfskin. They journeyed toward the mother's tears, intent on barter with Thenns for salt beef and steel. When the crow's cry fell, all 3 halted. Their leader, a woman with half her face scarred by frostbite, lifted her eyes to the wheeling speck. Her one good eye widened. "The watch follows," muttered the youngest man, hand going to the hilt of a chipped short sword. "No crow that," the woman whispered. "That's a green crow." And indeed, as the bird banked against the pale disk of sun, its wings seemed suddenly spanned by feather-shaped leaves, emerald bright, edges rimed in frost. For a heartbeat, the sky flickered green as summer grass dappled in dew. Then the crow tilted, scissoring black pinions, and was ordinary again, lost in cloud. The woman knelt, pressing gloved fingers into the snow. "We must go back. The cold will kill us before nightfall," protested another. "The Thenns have fires." "No fire burns hot enough to save you from that cold," she said. "This I know." She turned, started south, toward the wall, toward the stories her mother's mother had spit at in scorn. The young men lingered until the woman lifted her hands, showing fingernails already enameled white. "A sign," one ventured. She did not answer. All 3 turned south. Above, the crow flapped on through a sky that now pulsed, faint, with marrow-deep green, like the first stirring of a ghostly dawn. Beneath the frost fangs, a cave opened in a cliffside like a wound hacked into flesh of stone. At its mouth crouched a heart tree so ancient that its bleeding carved the cliff face in rivulets. A young giant, stoop-shouldered and hide-clad, knelt before that tree with palms upturned. Red sap dripped slow upon his head like tears of something too old to name. He did not stir. Giants were not given to prayer. Yet this one prayed, in the slow grinding song of his kind, syllables rolling like boulders down a mountain track. Each note took 10 heartbeats to shape. The wind answered him, with a hush so sharp, it sliced snowflakes in half. Deep in the cave, beyond the reach of day, lanterns glowed emerald. There, the children of the forest kept vigil, 6 figures robed in moss, eyes bright as dew in moonlight. At their feet grew a circle of mushrooms, caps translucent, veins pulsing faint. In the center of that circle sprawled a map of bone and bark and nettle. On it danced motes of ice no bigger than lice, swirling to form a shape like a man's crown. No child spoke, yet their sorrow pooled like sap. They had watched 1,000 winters claim old woods, but this winter promised more. A tide none of them could stem, for when a king of cold and green awoke, even the roots shivered. One child lifted a hand of little twigs and petals. "Long have we turned the seasons with songs and sap," spoke a voice only leaves could hear. "But some songs are older still, and some sap flows deeper. When the king walks, what place for the singers?" Another answered, eyes pale gold. "If the chorus be wide enough, perhaps even the king will listen." "His heart is riven," replied the first. "Ice without, summer within. A heart half broken may break us whole." Silence fell. Sap drummed. Far above, the giant concluded his prayer, rising with a rumble like splitting earth. Somewhere outside the cave a horn wept 3 bitter notes, and the wind swallowed them swift. The notes traveled root to root, stone to seed, carrying tidings of men who had dared cross frozen streams chasing a bear crowned with horror. The children of the forest lowered their heads. Whatever balance remained now tilted. The king who walked would choose soon, whether to hold ruin tight within his mirror-bright grasp, or to cast it like a shadow across dawn itself. The choice, however, might prove no choice at all. For what is a king without a kingdom? And what kingdom does cold make except a graveyard? In a keep of battered granite high above the lonely Bay of Seals, young Lyanna Mormont. Roused from sleep, she thought she would never survive. She had dreamed of wolves whose eyes were green fire, and of snow that burned like lime caught alight. She woke trembling, then found herself furious at her own fear. Bears of the north did not quake at nightmare's silly lessons. She rose anyway, threw on boiled leather jerkin, and strode barefoot to her window slit. The sea lay black, wave tops shivering jade in false dawn. Snow scudded across the bailey, yet something off coast shone, a pillar of ice faintly luminous. She blinked. When she looked again, it was gone. Lyanna turned inland. In the high meadows above Bear Island's narrow harbor, fires gleamed. Too many, burning too brightly. That should have stirred alarm, yet instead her skin pebbled with emotion she could not name. Sorrow heavy as an anchor, guilt warm as newly baked bread. Somewhere in those fires she sensed a choice unfolding. A breeze found her, tousling hair. It smelled not of brine but pine and sap and something impossibly wild. Lyanna drank it deep. When she dressed fully, she summoned her sworn shield Jarell, ordered preparations for voyage, and penned ravens to her cousins in Winterfell. Before the seals of Bear Island had dried upon parchment, snow began falling sideways in a wind that came from no quarter of any compass known to men. In the chaos of those first hours, none thought to question the emerald glimmer pulsing faint in the pupils of the castle's hounds. Even in sun-swept Dorne the wind carried rumor. A scarlet courier falcon lit on the arm of Princess Arianne Martell as she stood atop Skyreach's highest turret, debating troop levies with Lord Fowler. The bird's talons dripped ice where they touched her glove. Ice. From a bird that had flown half the width of Westeros. Servants gasped. Sign of ill omen. Arianne, ever bold, took the tiny scroll from beneath the falcon's wing. Before she unrolled it, frost crystals spread up the vellum like living lace. She uncurled the message, read 3 words, felt her mouth go dry. Dawn has fled. The sigil below was no house she knew, merely an inked crown split white and green, and perhaps a shadow etched round its rims, though when she looked twice the shadow was gone. She turned to Lord Fowler, eyes hard. Ready the lances. Order scouts beyond the Prince's Pass. Something stirs in the north. Something that thinks itself a king. Now, another boy with banners? Fowler scoffed. No, she murmured, watching sun bleed pale behind desert peaks. A knight with a crown. And though Dorne had never bowed to any northern monarch, Arianne felt the first tickle of wind that carried no heat at all, as if some giant door in the sky had cracked open, letting in the chill forgotten place where day had died. In King's Landing, where the small council argued wine tariffs, a novice of the Citadel stumbled into the throne room, face raw with frostbite. He collapsed at the foot of the Iron Throne, clutching a satchel of scrolls spanned in white crystals. None could pry his fingers open, until his death rattle coughed him limp. When at last they freed the satchel, they found all inside ruined by ice, save one scrap of parchment, unmarred, save for a single emblem. A crown of ice afloat in a ring of green flame. Cersei's youngest child, little Daeron, watched wide-eyed from behind his mother's skirts as the hand ordered the scrap burn. Yet the brazier devoured half and no more. The other half refused flame, fluttering for hours upon the coals without blackening before the queen's patience ran thin, and she cast it into Blackwater Bay. The scrap floated like leaf on water, drifting toward the grinning teeth of dusk. From the walls of the Red Keep, Daeron thought he saw green lights flicker upon the scrap as it spun. But when he called his mother, the tide had already borne it under. Far north again, as the first long night of new terror down-defisted its cold upon the realm, the Ranger Sir Arain Frost awoke alone. Frost caked in his beard. He lay not in snow, but atop a slab of stone, inside a ruin ringed by pale mushrooms. The memory of the bear, of the monolith, of that voice scratching through bone, returned so sudden he sobbed. He sat up, retched bile. No tracks marred the snow of the clearing. Garth's body was gone, as were the other brothers. Only a single object remained, a leaf carved of ice, lying on the stone beside his head. Its veins shimmered green. Orain brushed it. At once images flooded him, pillars of ice splitting, the wall groaning, a throne of crystal singing in desperation. He yanked his hand away, heart thrashing. The leaf melted the moment he ceased touching it, leaving a puddle clear as mirror. When Orain bent to peer into that mirror, he saw not his own fear-bitten face, but a crown, broken and mended, half ice, half green fire, and behind it eyes like winter's void, streaked with pine sap light. Orain bolted into the trees. He did not stop running until the wall's broken horn lay within sight, and the sky beyond churned green, black, and bitter white, like a bruise that would not heal. And so dawn fled, and dusk wore emerald, and somewhere beyond grief and bone, a king arose from cradle of frost, and bled summer's sap into veins of winter's heart, twining them as ivy twines a tomb. Each step he took cracked the world a little wider, and every breath he drew whispered in the skulls of men and giant, child and beast alike, I am the heart that cannot die, the winter that will not end. Bend your songs to me, and I will grant you silence everlasting. Raise your fires against me, and I will teach them how to burn until they freeze. Yet deeper still, beneath the king's new crown, glimmered that fracture of green, summer's wound or promise. The vault where he had slept emptied of others. They swept outward on winds of moon-bright hush, carrying his banner though no cloth showed. And the king turned south, step by step, patient as glaciers, swift as thought, leaving behind him a trail of saplings, frozen in perfect bloom, their leaves green stone caught forever in the ice. The first of those saplings took root in the footprint of a ranger named Frost, whose scream choked the winter air and never found an echo. Oh, ah! The dawn that followed did not belong to any season men had named. It seeped across the sky in bruised gradients of turquoise and pallid jade, as if the day star itself had been drowned beneath glacial waters. Snow fell sideways in needles too slender to see until they lodged in skin and stung like sparks from a forge. Crows huddled mute upon the merlons of Castle Black, iron bellies drawn tight, heads tucked into shoulders. They had no cause to spare. All their throats were clutched by a hush that tasted of grave dust and resin. Jon Snow paced the wall's command platform until the frost beneath his boots chipped away like brittle slate. The 50 men with him were half frozen, half terrified, yet stubborn in the way men become when there is no direction to run. Their breath made spirals that fled south on the wind, as though the air itself sought warmer kingdoms. Below, torchlight flickered in the tunnels, a tiny defiant ember inside the throat of an icebound titan. A horn lay shattered at Jon's feet. He nudged the biggest fragment with one toe and tried again to make sense of the break. The crack was almost delicate, running the length of the horn in scalloped arcs that resembled the grain of wood peeled by a draw knife. No blow from clumsy hands could split horn so fine. Had the sound itself broken it? Or something inside the horn none of them could see? Bowen Marsh, cheeks swollen and raw, joined him. Gates been barred thrice over. Chains, logs, ice, every trick we know. But if the dead have remembered ladders, we'll be hard-pressed. Ben? Is anything moving out there? A shadow or two. Marsh's eyes twitched. Jon could not decide whether with fear or the bite of wind. And the cold. It moves like a beast on 4 paws. He hesitated. Raven from Eastwatch says the sea has frozen a mile out. Morning tide rose white as glass and never sank. Fishers found gulls entombed in mid-flight. Jon rubbed the knotted scar upon his ribs. Send back my thanks. Tell them to light every beacon on their waystones. If something living still sails east of here, I want its eyes burning. Them to one ender. And if no beacons answer, then we know we are alone. As Bowen marshaled the runners, Jon peered northward. The forest where Orain Frost had vanished lay swaddled in a nacreous pallor. Even from atop the wall he felt it. A pressure within the silence, the flex of some enormous lung that breathed only once every 100 heartbeats. Each exhale drew warmth away. Each inhale sank color into the snow, until the world resembled chalk ground fine. Ghost prowled at his side, fur bristling. The dire wolf's crimson eyes never left the horizon. A low growl churned in his chest. No bark, no snarl, only the steady tremor of a taut bowstring. John let his glove rest between the beast's shoulder blades. The fur was warm, yet beneath that warmth ran shivers. "Easy," he muttered. Ghost's ears flicked. But the growl did not cease. Far below, the black iron winch that raised the outer gate began to sing. A tiny keening, as though some thin point of metal scraped along its gears. The chain trembled in its sockets. Rangers cursed, and torches sprang to life at window slits. Joan's hand wrapped around Longclaw's grip. He waited for footsteps, for groans, for the clatter that bespoke rams or grappling hooks. He heard none. The chain shook again, harder, and then stilled. When the silence fell, it cracked so loud John feared his eardrums might bleed. Nothing moved. The hush became complete, and born within that hush rose a smell, not decay, not rot, but sap. Sweet as pine tapped in spring. It drifted upward, curling about Jon's nostrils. He had smelled that same sweetness once, in a god's wood south of Moat Cailin, when the bog myrtles bloomed after too warm a rain. To scent it now, beneath enough ice to choke a dragon, made his spine jolt. From the shadows of the tunnel emerged a single figure, stumbling like a drunk. Its cloak was black, but its hood had been torn away, and where hair should have glimmered dark, John saw only strands of white-rimed crystal. He raced down the icy stair. By the time he reached the gate tower's inner yard, 4 spearmen had already ringed the newcomer. The man, or what remained, swayed, hands dangling. One hand still clutched a dragon-glass dagger. Its edge dripped water that hissed each time a drop met the stones. John shoved past the ring. "Stand aside." He lifted the lamplight. Beneath the cowl, he saw Orain Frost. At least what Frost had left. The ranger's eyes were rimmed in emerald motes that rotated like mote-flecked stars within a night without sky. Where his beard should have been dark, it lay lacquered in white rime. Lips cracked, revealing teeth turned greenish. But he breathed. John felt that breath, slow as a winter tide but warm, peculiarly warm and tinged with resin. Ser Orain. The ranger's eyes focused, blurred, focused again. "King," he rasped. John stiffened. "What king?" The dagger dropped, clanging. "The king wakes." Frost lifted a hand. On his palm lay a ghost of a leaf, nothing but outline now. Green caught inside a thin film of ice. One by one, crystals cracked away, and the green inside faded, turning white, then clear, then dust. Orain let the dust spill. "Where are the others?" "Gone," he breathed. "The bear, the crown." We followed torchlight through snow, but the sky turned underside out, and the hush ate our voices. He pitched forward. John caught him. The body was burning, feverish. The heat startled. John nearly dropped him. Beneath gloves he felt skin like embers wrapped in paper thin as birch bark. He called for Maester Aemon's apprentice, but no sooner had the words flown than Orain's eyes flared bright, and he spoke again, voice suddenly too calm. "Fire walks behind your shadow, Lord Commander. You will stand at winter's heart, where songs are forged and broken. Remember the green in the ice." The pupils shrank to pinpoints. "Remember pine and frost. It means the king is not whole." John did not understand, or would not. He demanded to know where Garth, Dywyn, the others had gone. Orain smiled as a dying man smiles upon an old joke. "The king called," he whispered, and then his chest shuddered once and ceased. His body collapsed inward, as though bones turned to soot. Cloak and mail slumped empty to the stones, black and limp. Only ice remained, shaped like ribs of glass. That too melted, vanishing as steam that smelled of crushed needles. No blood. No corpse. John stared at Longclaw's reflection in the wet flagstones. and thought how thin the sword looked there, like a mere scratch against vast dark. Sam'l Tarly had always believed knowledge a lantern that burned the closer for fear. In the rookery he proved it, copying ragged runes by lantern's glow while ravens jostled behind, clamoring for seed. Yet even Sam had to rest, and when his eyes blurred, he climbed the creaking steps to Amon's old cell to seek stillness. There, in the hush of a man long dead, he closed his lids. Dreams came. A river of ice wound through a forest of stone pines. Beneath the ice lay clouds, and beneath the clouds lay faces. Men he knew, men he studied in books, maesters gone centuries. Each face mouthed a single word. He woke with a word echoing, a heartbeat within a heartbeat. Nightroot. He blotted sweat with his sleeve. Nightroot. A legend among the children. A sap said to flow only once each epoch. When the worlds wound opened, Archmaester Highgrave had dismissed it as druidic fancy. But Highgrave had never walked a wall, nor smelled sap in blizzard air. Sam lit 2 more lamps and spread parchments. He translated the cross-hatched script line by line until dawn's queer light seeped under the door. The rune spoke of 2 hearts that beat as one. Froststone heart and summersap heart, bound by a crown of rivers, frozen mid-flow. If the hearts drifted apart, night would thicken until eventide slowed. If they fused, dawn might bore a tunnel through dusk lasting a single breath, but in that breath, the living could unmake winter. The scribe had footnoted the lore with a single quill dart. A king shall rise from the throttle of old blood, and in his breast shall war songs of seed and sword. Bend him green, or doom hewn white. Sam felt the hairs on his arms lift. Bend him green. What did that mean? A color, a growth, a hope. He thought of the leaf carved of ice Arain Pinklove described. Sam because Sam had studied every ranger's return. Bend green. Scarcely had he formed the notion than a raven screamed on the windowsill. Not croaked, a full, human scream, ragged and hoarse. Sam whirled. The bird thrashed against the glass, wings beating, until veins in its black pinions showed green in the dim. Its beak cracked the pane. A sliver dropped, glittering. Through the hole seeped a smell of pine resin. Sam's quill snapped. The scream died. The raven collapsed in a flutter of feathers, then slumped to the sill, dead. Its eyes, once ink black, had frozen pale as opals pierced by flecks of green. They stared at Sam until a gust shook the tower and blew the body away, scattering feathers like quills flung by a careless god. Return to John, Sam thought. But John was on the wall, too far. So Sam ran instead to the libraries below, where Donal Noy had stacked the shards of shattered spearheads. When he passed windows, he saw people pointing at the sky. Outside, the aurora had bloomed unnatural noon bright. Cascades of emerald draped horizon to horizon, pulsing as if pumped by a gigantic, irregular heart. Now and then the green wove with faint veins of winter blue, and each time they touched, white sparks shot down, seeding the clouds. Those sparks fell as snow so cold, they left black scorch prints upon stone. Sam clutched his cloak tight and muttered the word again. Nightroot. Cole. Bend green. He had to tell someone before the world froze beneath an aurora that feasted on heat. On Bear Island, the wind shrieked, names older than language across pine-cloaked cliffs. Lyanna Mormont's fleet. 3 longships, 90 men, rode silver lanes between whitecaps rimmed in frost. The sea smoke formed shapes above the prow. Antlers, wolves, a stag whose crown split in twin points of green. Sailors hissed prayers to the maiden and the smith, to Merling king and drowned god, unsure which heard this far north. Lyanna stood bareheaded, face flush. Slivers of ice needled her cheeks, but she did not flinch. At her belt hung a warhammer, the size of a carpenter's mallet, cast in the likeness of a bear's paw. Its haft had frosted white, yet in veins along the metal glimmered faint threads of green, as though sap pulsed inside iron. Her Aunt Jarell saw it first and gasped. That's Forgelight girl, Donal's mark. He made it for me when I swore my oath, Lyanna said. She flexed fingers gone numb, but it never shone before. The hammer's veins brightened, matching the ribbons in the sky. It pulsed, and Lyanna's heartbeat fell in time, deeper, slower. She felt her pulse course back through the haft, through palm, up the arm until her eardrums thudded with each beat. Something within the earth, beneath the water, answered the drum, a resonance like two stones struck, echo chasing echo. "Bend green," Sam would have whispered. Lyanna felt the phrase unspoken. Not bend as in break, but bend as in bow, shape, persuade. Could this hammer, this sign, kneel a king of winter? Could steel born of fire coax ice to lean toward sap? Before she could ask, a scout high in the rigging shouted. To eastward, half a league, a shape moved on the ice floes where no man should stand. It walked, no glided, long-limbed, slender, radiant white. Beside it, a second shape limped, smaller, misshapen. Its outline shimmered with motes of emerald, as though it bled sparks. "Arrow!" cried Jarrell. "No." Lyanna raised a hand. Signal only. She lifted the hammer, struck it once upon the rail. The iron rang deep. The note spilled across the water and skated away. Those on deck flinched, but Lyanna watched the figures. The tall, pale one halted. The smaller turned. Even across such distance, Lyanna felt its gaze. A cut of cold sunlight through pine. It lifted what could have been a hand, and a leaf of ice green-veined fluttered upon the wind, landing on the water between the fleets. Then they were gone. One blink, no trace. Men muttered superstitions. Lyanna ordered silence. She ordered a dinghy lowered and rowed herself to the floating leaf. It was bigger than a shield. When she lifted it, it weighed nothing. Where her fingers brushed, tips burned numb, but the numbness carried warmth too, like sap. She laid the leaf in the prow. Behind her, the men asked what now. "Now," she said. "We sail to the wall. And if the wall has fallen, we sail through." Now. Bold words, yet her heart drummed green fire and white ice in strange concord, and the hammer pulsed until all aboard felt its beat. Eastwatch by the sea had no sea that dawn, where salt waves should roil. A plain of glass stretched calm as grave water. Fishing towers listed, hulls frozen upright against the mirror. Men walked upon the ice testing with pikes. No crack answered. The plain would hold giants. Cotter pikes sent ravens barred with black and green markings. Ink froze before letters dried, yet the birds flew, west toward Castle Black, carrying words branded into thin slats of tin. Jon Snow read them at mid-morning and clenched his jaw. Sea turned to ice for a league out. A shadow walks upon it. Blows wind before it walks. Wind smells of pine, no tree. Request flamma pikes or gods help us. Jon turned to Sam. Flame pikes. Dragonfire. Sam said. Jon looked to the sky where dawn had not advanced. No dragon's sword. He thought of his sister Sansa's letter in the rookery, unopened 3 nights. He should have answered. Before he could choose words, steel clashed below. A cry rose. Gate breach. Jon sprinted, ghost at heel. Within the tunnel, frost speared from the ceiling in blades. Under each blade stood a shape draped in black. Not wights. These moved not by jerks, but with supple grace. Rangers fell, throats spraying steam. Jon glimpsed cloth beneath the attackers' cloaks. Not the black of Night's Watch, but mottled white and pale green, pattern of pine needles swirling in snow. Their swords were leaf-thin, translucent, yet cut steel like cheese. Jon met the first at spear's length. Longclaw rang, but where Valyrian met Iceleaf, sparks leapt bright emerald and died. The shock numbed his wrists. The assailant slid past, flicked a wrist, and Jon's gorget parted. Only Ghost's leap saved him. The wolf sank fangs into a wrist rigid and cold. Emerald light pulsed under the skin. The creature hissed. No sound, but the air wavered. Ghost recoiled, muzzle frosted white. Sam arrived panting, dragging a sack of dragonglass daggers. He hurled one. The blade struck a second attacker above the eye. The creature froze mid-step, then melted to slush that smelled of sap. Jon zeiced another blade, reversed it underhand, and rammed into the chest of the one Ghost had bitten. The chest cracked. Green motes fluttered out. The body dissolved. 4 remained. They slowed, circled John. Each blinked eyes snow-white with pinpricks of pine. One stepped forward, lifted twin-barreled wrists, and clashed them. Leaf swords merged into a single shaft, tipped both ends. It pointed at the dragon glass. "We share root," a voice rang in Joan's skull. "Stone that drank fire drinks sap also. Strike us and you strike the king." "We will," John hissed. "Until he bleeds dawn." Ghost growled assent. The creatures tilted heads, perhaps in curiosity, perhaps in scorn. Then one extended a hand toward Sam. Fingers unfolded like petals, revealing an ice petal. Within lay a second leaf. This one shimmered half green, half white. "Bend or break." The voice fell silent. Creatures retreated as one, walked backward through ice blades and were gone. The tunnel steamed where they passed, ice melting behind into puddles the color of dawn. John turned to Sam. The big man shook, yet kept the leaf between trembling palms. "He wants me to choose," Sam said. "Not you," John replied as bells clanged across the yard. "All of us." Bran Stark's dreams had always been doors. This night he slipped through one carved of weirwood root and shadow, down pillars of memory. He found himself inside a vast hall of ice, where heartbeats boomed slow as creation. At the hall's center stood a man wrought of mirror shards, face veiled by frost. In his breast pulsed a single knot of light, half white, half green, twisting like sapling roots around a buried seed. Bran tried to speak, but words iced on his lips. The man turned. No malice in that gaze, only loneliness so ancient it felt like hunger. He did not move, yet the hall contracted around him. Bran saw shapes along walls, children, giants, men in black, all frozen in poses of anguish. The faces wept. Sap. The man uncurled a hand. In that palm, a leaf appeared, green as summer. He closed fist, opened. Now leaf was white. Closed, opened. Half green, half white. Closed, opened. Dust. His other hand reached into his chest, drew out a root of light, and offered it to Bran. A voice, thin as wind chimes. "Take seed. Bind wound." Bran hesitated. The seed glowed hot. When he reached, cold burned his fingers as heat might. He flinched. The seed retracted. The man lowered head as though disappointment were a weight too heavy. Walls groaned. Cracks vined the hall. Bran heard Mira shouting far away. He forced himself from the dream, waking in a tower chamber at Winterfell. Summer slept by the hearth, restless. Beyond Arrowloop's green aurora stitched sky into banners. Bran's palms bled small crescents where nails dug. Seed. Bind wound. He remembered Jojen's words. After the last green seer dies, a new one must choose root or sky. Bran had chosen sky, whatever that meant. Now a king of ice asked him to mend a wound older than his house. He rolled to his wheelchair, but the room's door swung open before he reached it. Sansa entered wrapped in a sable cloak. "The lights," she said. "They've reached Winterfell." He gestured at his hands. Sansa saw blood. Swallowed. "Send ravens," Bran said, voice rough. "To Old Town, to King's Landing, to Dragonstone if Targaryen sails have landed. The night is changed." "Jon needs us," Sansa whispered. "He needs all of us." Bran's gaze unfocused a moment, falling inward. "And maybe the king too." Sansa stiffened. "Which king?" "The one beyond the wall." She thought he meant Night King. Bran shook his head. "A king with a heart split green." Her brow furrowed. Fear, confusion, dismissal layering like winter cloaks. But she nodded. "I'll send ravens. And prepare every blacksmith." Donal Noy discovered something. Dragon glass wedded to iron may sing a new song. One half frost, one half fire. That hammer Lyanna carries, its veins burn sap. "How do you know?" "I dreamed it." Bran said. And the dream was truer than waking. Sansa left to rouse maesters. Bran wheeled to the window. Aurora licked the battlements. For a heartbeat, he smelled Bear Island salt, Eastwatch brine, the pine of haunted forest, all at once, as if the winds converged through him. Somewhere winds converged indeed, around a throne of crystal and sap, where a king counted heartbeats, and waited for the world to decide how it would kneel. Atop the Frostfang Glacier, the king stepped from his vault. Footprints glowed, leaving behind saplings carved of ice. His followers, others white as moon shards, spread, sounding no horn but frost rumbled with each step. The vault sealed behind, runes extinguished. The king paused before a pool locked in permafrost. Into it he gazed, and within gazed back a face half wildling youth, half ancient child, eyes cyclone-pupilled. The image fractured into dozens. Jon's face, Sam's, Lyanna's, Bran's, Sansa's, even Arianne's far south clutching her frozen falcon. They revolved like stones caught in a tide he could not touch yet. He raised his hand. The pool iced opaque. He began southward. Each step covered miles. The dead rose, but he waved them down, sending them to sleep again beneath snow. This war he wished not for whites. He wished for a bridge between his hearts, the white and the green. But if none bent, he would break the land until bending became its only motion. High above, the aurora's veins thickened, green braiding blue. Where braids nodded, stars winked out, as though curtains drew across them. Yet in one corner of the heavens, a star bright as hammered silver burned steady, defiant. The king saw it. He paused. One heartbeat, then another, watching the star. In its burn he felt heat like forge core. He turned his face away, but the star's light scraped his crown like whetstone. From behind him, a voice small as winded harp. "Does the wound ache, my king?" One of the pale lieutenants, taller than the others, features softer. The king did not answer. He pressed fingers to the emerald crack in his crown. Pine-scented vapor whirled. The lieutenant bowed. "Let us kill the star," it whispered. The king's pupils widened. Green storm. He lowered hand. "Not yet. Until the star kneels, the song remains unended." Then he walked on, and ice flowers bloomed in his wake, patterned like the veins of leaves. Half green, half white, as if the world itself pondered which hue suited winter best. At Old Town, Archmaester Marwyn cut through fools yammering of comets. He seized a lens of black glass, rumored hued by Valyria's last flame, and ascended the Hightower's rookery. Through the lens the aurora revealed hidden layers, knots, runes, currents, spiraling to a single point north of the wall. At the center, he glimpsed a crown of woven roots, tipped with icicles like teeth, bloodied green. "Sap," he muttered. "Nightroot." Behind him a novice paled. Marwyn snapped orders. "Gather every treatise on children, others, and sap magic." He ordered a raven to Dragonstone. If Daenerys Targaryen had at last returned, her dragons might yet scorch a path through dusk. But the message he sealed with Valyrian glyphs none but dragonkin could read. "Green bends the white crown. Seek Hammerbearer." He had heard rumor of a girl on Bear Island. As the raven took flight, Marwyn trimmed his beard with a shard of obsidian. Blood welled bright. The shard drank it, veins pulsing faint green. He flung it away. Too late. 3 drops fell upon the lens. Where blood met black glass, runes flared and etched, swirling into shape of a leaf half consumed by frost. With a hiss, Marwyn realized the truth. Knowledge could bend the king as steel might. But knowledge required blood, and blood in cold clotted quick. He turned to ready ink, quills, fires that would not freeze. Time left measured now in beats of a distant heart splitting itself. 5 days later dawn never arrived at Castle Black. Only emerald dusk hung, pulsing. A storm rolled from the north sounding no thunder. Flickers within its belly frozen in pause. When the clouds parted at Wall's crest, men saw figures approaching. The king's vanguard, armed in blades of leaf ice, marching not by rank, but by pattern, shifting like growth rings. Jon Snow stood with Sam, Lyanna newly arrived, and Bran, who came on a litter borne by shaggy northern men. Bran's fingers twined about a seed of light half green. Sam clutched the leaf gift. Lyanna hefted her hammer. Jon wore his dragonglass dagger tied to Longclaw's pommel with weirwood twine. When the figures halted inside bowshot, the king emerged from between two pines that bent as if in reverence. He stood calm. Crown cracked lit from within. His eyes found each leader, Bran's first, then Lyanna's, then Jon's. At last they lingered on Sam, and in Sam's head bloomed words shaped like wind among ferns. Bend the leaf, and dawn returns. Break it, and night shall root forever. Sam swallowed. How? The king opened a hand. A leaf formed there, white. He closed fist. The leaf became green. He flashed a half-smile. Jon stepped forward. We will not kneel to cold. This crown kneels to no cold. The voice rang through every skull. It kneels to no fire. It seeks the joining, so the wound may close. Lyanna raised her hammer. And if we refuse? The king turned. Behind him, in the forest, saplings of ice shattered, spraying snow-bright shards that drifted like feathers. A wind rose, carrying screams trapped within frost. Men shivered though cloaks weighed heavy. The king looked back. Refuse, and roots wither. Stone devours seed. Night devours dawn. Yet crown still yearned summer. He extended both palms now. One held a heart of ice, one a core of sap. He brought them near. They glowed where edges almost kissed. The aurora, above dimmed, awaiting verdict. A hush, deeper than any winter fell. It pressed so thick, men heard their pulses echo off ice. Bran wheeled forward, ignoring cries. He raised his seed. Green light reached to the king's sap core. White halo reached to Bran's frozen palms. Between, a ribbon formed, half color of dawn, half of moon. Bran said, I will bind if you will bend. The king's face twitched. Pain or hope, none could say. Bind. He spoke. Jon strode to Bran's side. Lyanna to Jon's other. Sam last. They formed a line. 4 points of mortal heat against cold. Bran let the seed float. Sam lifted the leaf. Lyanna poised the hammerhead. Jon set Longclaw's edge beneath the leaf stem. Together they breathed. The forest inhaled. The ribbon thickened, coiling, tethering king to men. Snow melted beneath their boots, revealing black soil smelling of spring moss. Then a horn blew. 3 blasts, south road. Cotton pikes, flammapikes at Eastwatch had fallen. The sea shattered. Dragons had come, spitting fire that froze mid-air. Screams rolled like surf. Jon hesitated. In that flicker the king's eyes widened, doubt cut the ribbon. A gust smashed against the wall. Ice cracked along its length, rumbling like endless drums. Whites rose beyond treeline in legions silent. Lyanna swung her hammer, striking the fissure between sap and ice. The blow shot green sparks that rained over king and men alike. The king staggered. His crown's crack widened. A gout of white crystal burst. He dropped to one knee. Behind, others hissed. Sam thrust the leaf into the gush. Bran pressed his seed atop. Sap bled around their fingers. The king's chest flared bright green. He screamed. A cry that shredded clouds, tore aurora to ribbons of flame, toppled ice spires half a league. Snow stopped. Silence drummed once more. When they dared open eyes, king knelt, crown fused. White veined with green. His eyes mirrored that crown. Winter iris wrapped round summer pupil. He bowed head. Dawn. He breathed. Voice not wind, but rainfall. Above, a sliver of true sun cracked horizon, pale gold kneading through jade. Jon let breath shudder out. Ghost howled, not in fear but rapture. The howl spread, carried by wolves south and east, echo on echo until fishermen at Sisterton lifted heads to wonder at joy and a wind no longer cold. Bran lifted hands slick with sap and ice. They left prints in the air that turned to leaves sparkling then dissolving into motes. He smiled through tears. Bend green, he whispered. Bind the wound. Yet far away, beyond even Eastwatch, The sea ice groaned. Something vast moved beneath, displeased. Twin shadows coiled, one black, one pallid green. A dragon's roar answered, but behind that roar coiled a second voice, wet and hissing. Fire unites, or fire devours. The sun inched higher, but its warmth felt frail as a promise whispered through shut door. Men would need more than one dawn. Jon sheathed Longclaw. It begins, he told the king who knelt. The king rose, visage solemn. It ends, he answered, when crowns crumble to soil and seeds rise. He looked south, where the black water sparkled unseen beyond curvature. Walk with me, night sons, and teach me fire that does not blind. And so they walked, king and wolf, maester and bear, cripple who flew, and brothers sworn, into a morning neither winter nor summer, but some new season that lacked a name, carrying shards of leaf and sap and ice. Every step cracked the world open wider to green. Behind them, whites crumbled, others folded into foam, and the walls fracture sealed. Yet high above, that star of hammered silver trembled as though struck anew by distant mallet, uncertain whether to blaze brighter or fall.